Tonight we'll be talking about police brutality. Like hip-hop, police brutality is something people of color have known about for a long time, but has since become popular for white people to talk about. It's essentially the Macklemore of social issues. And just like Macklemore, it is tearing communities apart. Even here in Minnesota, up until the recent Black Lives Matter protests at the 4th Precinct, many white Minnesotans did not think that police brutality was an issue in our state. And according to the residents of Maple Grove, it still isn't. Since 1854, when the first Minnesotan Police Department was established in St. Paul, we have called upon police to protect us from violence, theft, challenging intersections, and to inspire our best male strippers. For a long time, we have put our trust in police officers to protect us from ourselves. We trust officers enough to even give them a gun, a baton, and a mustache. And we assume that they will use these things for good, despite the fact that anyone with a mustache and a baton looks crazy evil. Yet, as we learned from M. Night Shyamalan, people we trust can hurt us. Over and over again. I mean, how can you make us watch The Last Airbender? Sixth Sense was a masterpiece. And much like Shyamalan's movies, this has never made any sense, but we still make excuses for it. And unfortunately, we only tend to take notice when confronted when people die from police violence. Usually, these are what the media have come to call officer-involved shootings, a phrase that carefully evades placing blame on the officer who shot somebody. The most recent of these incidents was the murder of Jamar Clark, an unarmed African-American man who was shot and killed by police officer Mark Ringenberg just 4 weeks ago. Jamar's death is one of many high-profile police shootings that have galvanized movements for police reform and racial justice. But it was in no way the first police shooting in Minnesota. According to a recent report by the Star Tribune, at least 141 people in Minnesota have been killed by police since the year 2000. For contrast, only 57 people have died falling through ice since 2000. And we live in a state filled with lakes. And it says a lot about our state that we have charged an equal number of police officers as we have lakes for these deaths. 0. A closer look at the report reveals persistent disparities in exactly who gets killed. While black people only make up approximately 6% of the population in Minnesota, they make up 30% of those killed by police. Asian and Native Minnesotans are also killed by police at higher rates than whites. Police killings are just the fruit of the grotesque tree of police brutality in Minnesota, which coincidentally tastes a lot like honeydew. Because, like honeydew, police brutality is despicable and overly prevalent in our fruit salad society. Fuck you, honeydew, you garbage fruit of injustice. Garbage fruit. Most cases of police brutality come from inappropriate conduct or language, harassment, excessive force, discrimination, retaliation, or even theft. Nowhere is this more clear than Minnesota's largest city of Minneapolis. This May, a Minneapolis police officer named Michael Griffin was indicted on federal charges after he violently assaulted 2 men in nightclubs and lied to investigators about the incident. Michael Griffin had previously 22 complaints, with only 1 sustained by the Minneapolis Department of Police. In total, the city paid $410,000 to those Griffin abused. We shouldn't be surprised because Minneapolis has been paying victims at such a high rate that you would think they're a distant father trying to buy their children's love. Let's take a look.
When allegations of police misconduct move from the street to the courtroom, more often than not, Minneapolis has to pay. KARE 11 requested numbers from the city of Minneapolis and found, since January 2010, Minneapolis has dealt with 141 officer conduct lawsuits. The city won 51 of them, either at trial or when a judge dismissed the case. But the city had to pay money in 90 of those cases, settling 86 times and losing 4 trials. In that time, Minneapolis has paid $10.7 million for officer conduct lawsuits. That includes 2 years, 2011 and 2013, when the city had to pay more than $4 million each year.
$10.7 million. Man, that's a fuckload of money. When confronted with that information, you can make one of two assumptions. You can either assume that Minneapolis police are wrongfully attacking a lot of innocent people, or you could assume that Minneapolis police are wrongfully attacking a smaller number of innocent people with Fabergé eggs. But even when you thought things were hopeless, KARE 11 was sure to add a little silver lining.
Minneapolis's numbers don't look so bad when compared to Chicago, which paid $54.2 million just last year for officer misconduct litigation.
Really? All we have to say for ourselves is at least we're not Chicago. Chicago has an entire musical about committing murder in Chicago. Titled Chicago. All Minneapolis has is the Mary Tyler Moore Show. At least we're not Chicago. All right. Unfortunately, it's been this way for way too long. Since the early 90s, the number of reported cases of excessive force by Minneapolis police has stayed stagnant. The key word is reported, because many victims of police brutality are not especially interested in asking the same group of people who just beat them up for justice. And no wonder. Imagine if your teacher called you stupid, and when you tried to report it, the principal said, "That's just how you are. That's how we do it here at Glendale Elementary. John, you are stupid. You deserve to be called stupid, and we aren't going to punish your teacher because she's just doing her job. Did I mention you are stupid?" Most have good reason to not trust that their case will be given much merit. Separate audits of St. Paul and Minneapolis citizen review systems showed a systematic bias that favored accused police officers. Even now in Minneapolis, the Office of Police Conduct Review, the group responsible for responding to police allegations, dismisses nearly half of the cases they receive and rarely punishes officers responsible. Between 2008 and 2014, there were more than 2,000 complaints against police officers. In that time, only 70 officers were suspended for their actions, and only 12 were fired from the force. The rest were referred to mediation or internal coaching, which I can only assume, after watching a lot of 1980s cop movies, involves a cop placing his gun and badge on the table for being a loose cannon, and then getting him back by the end of the movie. Yet Minneapolis residents are not bearing the brunt of police brutality equally. Victims are disproportionately people of color, mainly living in communities like North Minneapolis. This is partly because the police who are hired to protect Minneapolis are overwhelmingly not as diverse as the people living in Minneapolis. In fact, 94% of Minneapolis police don't even live in Minneapolis. The Minneapolis Police Department's motto is to protect with courage and serve with compassion. It's hard to do that when the people you are required to protect and serve are complete strangers. It doesn't need to be this way. Minneapolis can solve these problems, but it won't happen unless we take drastic steps to hold our police departments accountable for their actions. One way to do that is to give police officers an incentive to avoid misconduct. One nonprofit named the Committee for Professional Policing has proposed a ballot measure that, if passed in November 2016, would require Minneapolis police officers to have professional liability insurance. If an officer receives substantial complaints about abuse or excessive force, their insurance premiums would go up. Eventually, cops who receive many individual complaints, like Michael Griffin did, would become uninsurable, and other more respectful and professional officers would replace them. This is not a radical concept. We already require surgeons and lawyers and even accountants to carry malpractice insurance, but for some reason, not the only profession that requires a gun, baton, and a mustache. As As of last year, the measure was only 1,000 signatures away from getting on the ballot in 2016. Go to www.insurethepolice.org to find out more ways you can help make Minneapolis the first city to require police to carry professional liability insurance and help end police brutality. Thank you very much. That was MN10.